Well, here we go. We got a lot to talk about. It's a busy Friday, and our leadoff hitter is Mr. Valente, and he gets issue number 1. David, you are on the clock.
Hey, so we are, 3 days away from Donald Trump taking the oath of office at noon on Monday for the final 4 years of his administration. Let's start with predictions for the next 4 years. Give me 3 predictions about the Trump administration and how the next 4 years will go. For me, I've got 3 that are kind of all over the place. We've got, I think, tariffs and Trump's immigration stance will lead to just unimaginable inflation and high losses at the midterms, flipping both houses to the Democratic Party. The Republicans will begin pressuring older members of the Supreme Court to resign, such as Clarence Thomas, maybe Samuel Alito, while they can be replaced with younger ideologues. I think that's going to be very quickly that you're going to start seeing the pressure, either, pressure for Clarence Thomas to resign because of his questionable business dealings, but they want the ability to be able to turn those seats over early in the term while they have the House and the Senate. And then I think Speaker Johnson will be out of a job before 2026, either through attrition of members of Congress either resigning or leaving and then losing the majority, or the right flank really torpedoes them, just as they did with Kevin McCarthy. Those are my 3 predictions for the next 4 years. Let's hear everyone else's.
So those are your 3 predictions. Now, before you offer up your own predictions, by the way, I want you to comment on David's 3 predictions as to what you think the validity and the likelihood of those predictions coming to fruition would be, first and foremost. Now, I understand that we'll all be painted with our own political brushes here from where you think things may go. If you are a Trump follower, you probably have a more rosier prediction than David had right there. If you're not, I assume you'll be looking at the negative stuff on the Trump side.
Sure.
And when I want a legitimate, unfiltered, unbiased Trump opinion, I always start first with Larry Schultz. Larry.
Well,
what do you think of David's prediction?
I think he's right about the inflation that's going to result from tariffs and a harsh attack. One of the problems with making a prediction about something Donald Trump says is you have to stop at some point and say, well, does he really mean this, or is he just lying like he does all the time? And so, that, the other day he's talking about being the only president who's ever had flags at half-mast at his inauguration. Mm-hmm. Well, it's just not true. Another criminally adjacent Republican president had the same thing. A decent man, Harry Truman, happened to pass away less than 30 days before Nixon's. So, in any event, so it makes it kind of hard to predict because you have to decide which of the things that Trump says he's going to do you believe he is actually even going to try to do, or secondly, succeed in doing. Having said that, I do think he's right about the Supreme Court, David is. They are going to try and get some of those people out. Now, whether they'll do this with a private phone call between Trump and Alito like they did the other day or not, I don't know. I mean,
I'm always impressed by how you manage to turn that knife just in regular conversation, working the needling, and that's really impressive.
Well, I mean, if you watch this stuff, especially court-related stuff, that is so far outside the mainstream. If I see one of the circuit judges, especially one of the ones that I have cases pending before, it's, hello, how are you? And that's it. There's never, ever any discussion of any kind of business thing between me and them. And that's a fairly small county in a fairly low population state that we're not dealing with. We're not dealing with international intrigues and that sort of thing. The idea that Alito spoke to him at all and then had the temerity to say that something that I knew, which was that they were going to decide the case the next day, He didn't know. It's just so Trumpy you can't believe it. So,
but the decision went against Trump.
Oh, it sure did.
Yeah, but not by Alito or Thomas.
Okay, but
I mean, there were two of those people who.
Oh, the sky's falling! The sky's falling all the time.
It is.
Well, if you're talking to litigants and you're a Supreme Court justice, that is the definition of the sky getting ready to fall. Especially if the Supreme Court justice is lying through his teeth about what happened. Not to let that take up the whole segment. The other thing, he had the inflation, he had the Supreme Court, and he had Mike Johnson losing his task. I don't really know about that. Certainly it's a close call just because there's not a big gap between the two parties. And there could come a point where some Democrats might say, well, bad as Mike Johnson is, look at these other people. And we don't want them either. And so
Larry never misses a chance.
They could join in, right? And vote for the guy. Not because they like him, but because they hate the alternative.
You didn't disappoint, Larry. Admiral Stubblefield.
Yeah, I thought the observation about trying to put pressure on Thomas and Alito to step down is probably correct. The question is, will they be receptive to it? The Democrats tried to do the same thing with their older members of the Supreme Court,
RBG,
and they said, forget about it. We're not going to step down. I doubt seriously if Thomas or Alito steps down, even though there will be a desire on the part of President Trump and others for them to step down, but I don't think it's going to happen. I'm sorry, Rob.
Is he the other predictions?
Yeah. The other one was that David said was about the inflation with tariffs. The inflation is also going to be driven in part, if we do see inflation, with the immigration policies that we have with the farm workers and the hospitality workers. I think it's going to be a very interesting play between the legislators and the administration and what will be put into place with the inflation being the determinant. If they think that inflation is going to start going up, there's going to be less reason to join Trump, and I think both the tariffs and the inflation. That's going to be an interesting dynamics to watch. And I think what I'm going to find to be very intriguing as well is how we've been received on the international front.
All right, I suspect our next two panelists will paint a more rosy picture than we just had. Mr. Gilstrap.
First of all, good morning. The first, addressing what David brought up, I do think that Clarence Thomas will step down. I don't think it will have anything to do with corruption that I don't think exists. I think RBG, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, set the example for why aging justices who have a political stance, which she did, and certainly what Justice Thomas has in terms of he's very conservative. I think in order to conserve the conservative court, he will step down. It will be late in Trump's term, but I think that's probably the right thing to do. I mean, he's been on since it was H.W. Bush, right, that appointed him. So I do think he will step down. I don't see any reason for Speaker Johnson to leave his place at all. And as far as the tariffs are concerned, the Trump derangement syndrome, it's already spinning up. It's the old cliche that people take Trump literally, but they don't take him seriously. And he is a poker player. He's completely transactional. So when he stirs the pot, and we'll see what happens. But if you look at the record of his first administration, it was really nothing but prosperity. And to think that he's going to fire torpedoes amidships into the economy just because he can is silly. But it is the narrative of the media and of the terrified left-wingers. And I don't think that's going to be an issue. What I think, the three things I think we're going to see, I think we're going to see the hostages.
Hold on. We're going to come back after those. I just want to get your comments on David's first.
Okay.
Mr. Height.
Well, I'll say, as far as the tariffs, I think a lot of that is posturing. I think that a lot of that is him playing poker and trying to get the rest of the world to see that, hey, the trade deals that you have now may not stay in place, that we're going to take a look at these. And if we do put tariffs in, that I think Trump believes that these will inflation go up? Yeah, probably, but these are short-term pain for a long-term gain. And down the road, things will reset themselves, and you may see a lot of those jobs return to the United States and better trade deals because of it. As far as the Supreme Court, is he trying to get a couple of them to resign? Yeah, I think so. That's just the way Trump works. Him calling the Supreme Court, I didn't have a problem with that. You can talk to Alito. Doesn't have a whole lot to do, I don't think, with the cases that are before them. I think it had more to do with them resigning. And I would agree that Justice Thomas probably will sometime in the next 3 years resign, and he'll get an opportunity to put somebody else on there. And then the last one, what was the last one?
Speaker Johnson.
Speaker Johnson. Who cares? You know what? He barely got elected this time. It's like Larry says, who else are they going to put in there? I think, irritates me with the Republicans that they seem so divided sometimes that they can't coalesce behind one person, that there's constant infighting. When the Democrats are in power, there's a little bit of fighting in the beginning, but they coalesce behind a speaker, and Pelosi ruled with an iron fist. And, I think the Republicans could learn a little bit from how they do things. Now, will Democrats vote for Mike Johnson just because he's better than the alternative? No. It's all politics. They will never vote for a Republican for Speaker. They will vote for whoever it is on the Democrat side to be a Speaker. That's just the way it goes. It's policy straight down the middle. So he'll remain Speaker for at least the first 2 years.
All right, we have your three predictions. If you have those ready to go, Mike, I'll start right back with you, and we'll kind of have to work through these a little bit quickly.
Number one prediction: pain for the Democrats. Pain.
Mr. T, Clubber Lang.
You can see the agony on their face already, and he's not even president just by the things he's saying. Their heads are already explaining. I see 4 years of pain, anguish, and I love it. The second thing is
Larry already looks constipated.
Yeah. The second thing is the southern border wall and major immigration reform and a lot of deportation. That's coming. That was one of the major focuses in his campaign, and I know for sure with some of the people you see being appointed that's going to be a major factor early on. And then my last one is the elimination of federal agencies. I can see this taking on some heat and from the Democrats and not wanting to eliminate. But he's already said, things like Department of Education could go, the EPA could go. I think they're going to do a deep dive in to see, do we really need all these agencies, or are they working? For the billions and billions of dollars that we're funding these agencies for, are they working? Is our education system where it is and where it needs to be in the world stage? And I would say right now, no.
All right, I'm going to move on to Mr. Gilstrap's three. You got a minute and a half to get your three in.
A minute and a half. Okay. I think what we're going to see is very early on, we're going to see all the American hostages certainly released out of Gaza. I believe we're going to see the southern border closed, and the areas along the Gulf of America. And I think the biggest thing and there's going to be a cultural shift as well as a shift within the hiring practices of federal agencies. We're going to see emphasis of merit over skin color and social status. I think DEI is dead. I think all of those people who have invested their hundreds of thousands of dollars in the education for women's studies and all of that in pursuit of the DEI it's going to be misspent. I think the final nail is in that coffin.
Mr. Stubblefield.
Yeah, instead of going predictions, which is there's so many moving parts here, it's hard to make a prediction. I'm going to do some hopes. There will be 3 hopes. One is that we do not get drawn in, or do we not initiate a war of consequence. Second is I hope we can do something with the national deficit. We have to do that I don't know the mechanism, but we got to address the national deficit. My third hope is that we do not abandon the principle that has made our country so great, and that is compassion. And we've lost that somewhere down the line. We need to recover compassion.
Nobody cares about compassion.
John, you said that in jest, but unfortunately, I think that's a part of the root of our problem now. Yes, I do.
Mr. Schultz.
Yeah, we're going to see a whole bunch of inflation. That's one of my predictions.
Give me a predicted rate of inflation. What do you got?
Back to where it was a couple of years ago when we were told by the people in the people in the Republican Party that this was the worst thing that's ever happened to America and blah blah blah. And Donald Trump is not going to lower the price of your groceries. I'd ask everybody, go to your local grocery store where you shop, and the next time you're there, before he's inaugurated, take pictures of the price of chicken, hamburger. Take a picture of the gas pump sign the next time you do it. I think we're going to see a ton of inflation. And I also do not believe that the Republican Party, despite what it says, is going to pay as they go for all these changes they want to make to the southern border and everything else. But instead, we'll be racking up a bunch more debt. That's I guess a couple of predictions. I also think that over time there will be infighting in the Republican caucus, both within the caucus of the Republicans in the legislature and between them and Donald Trump. And that is going to be both ugly and enjoyable. As they begin to try and reckon with, well, when he told us this, was he telling us the truth or was he lying? A lot of us have already sort of made a general conclusion about that with Donald Trump, but there are still people in the Republican caucus of both houses of the Senate.
That's our pain.
Yeah. That's the pain, the self-inflicted pain, you might say, that's coming for them.
Predicting infighting in the Republican caucus is like predicting the sun rises in the east. That's not a hard pull.
But that's going to be infight. This is going to be infighting about whether the president of the United States is fit to be the president and he's in your party, or whether he's a traitor or a criminal or a liar. Though I don't know that there could be a lot of debate about that up to going forward from here. So
comes back to you, Mr. Valente.
Yeah, I think I agree with Larry's assessment. Bonus prediction: at least a third of Trump's cabinet will resign before the end of his term. Just going off of past performance, and I think one of his big fractures, where it was Steve Bannon in the first term, is going to be Elon Musk in the second term, where Trump is going to start thinking that Elon Musk is taking too much power for himself, and that'll cause a massive fracture. So, but it's going to be an interesting 4 years for Donald Trump and the United States.
You know, the Elon Musk one, if you wouldn't have said that, that was going to be mine. I think within 2 years, Elon Musk and Donald Trump will not be on speaking terms. 2 years is a stretch, but I'm going to use that because that's the first election cycle. But I don't believe in any circumstance two alpha males with incredibly large egos, which is kind of the byproduct of being an alpha male, can coexist peacefully. And when one of them has all the money in the world, like Musk does, he doesn't really need the other one. So I think within 2 years, when Musk finds out he can't get his own way on everything, he goes. And I don't think Trump's going to love the idea of sharing the spotlight with him in any. My other prediction is that Marjorie Taylor Greene becomes the next Speaker of the House. Oh. This is more of a hope. honestly, I don't think there's any.
There's my pain.
There's no way it can happen.
There's a place where there ain't going to be no Democratic votes. I'll tell you what, bro.
But this just won't good radio, Rob.
I do, and this is a selfish hope for strictly good talking points. This is the best that I could hope for.
There's Republican pain right there. Yeah.
This is my dream, is that Marjorie Taylor Greene becomes the speaker. And the other half of that is I also enjoy when somebody is the biggest critic of an office. I kind of like to see them take that office to find out exactly what the problems are that you think you can fix. Here's your chance to fix them.
Right.
So that's kind of the other aspect of that too. All right, David, good start. Appreciate you hitting the lead off. Following in Mr. Ferretti's footsteps there. It's 9 o'clock. And on the clock with issue number 2, The Admiral, Bill Stubblefield.
Rob, with the passing of Jimmy Carter, it made me start thinking, what makes a great president? Carter is recognized as a great humanitarian and did great things after he left office. But his times in office are questioned now. My father used to tell the story of Truman, that when Truman was president, a joke went around, he was throwing $1 bills out of the airplane. And someone came up to him and said, "Why are you doing that, Mr. President?" He said, "Well, I'm trying to make some people happy." And the guy said, "Well, jump out yourself and you make everybody happy." And so there's some truth with Carter. Carter did some things I think that have not really been given full credit for. He was an international peacemaker in 1978, the Camp David Accords between Egypt and Israel. It held together for several years. He appointed a record number of women, blacks, and Hispanics to government jobs. He strengthened Social Security. He gave greater work incentives for beneficiaries. He emphasized reducing deficit and inflation. He passed the Revenue Act, which was a $19 billion tax cut. All of these things that I think would serve well, but yet he's not recognized as being a great president. Question to my esteemed colleagues: how do we judge individuals? Not only Jimmy Carter, but how do we judge any person president? We can use Obama and Trump as yardsticks. So what criteria do we do? And I realize there's a partisan filter put on this.
And the Jimmy Carter ranking, Bill, you were telling me earlier this morning, was
26. C-SPAN has a poll they put out after each new president come in. So Biden is currently not in the C-SPAN poll. Trump is. And the poll is something like, I think, 140 political historians or people that are very much involved with politics. They have a fairly good feel for the impact that a person has, and it looks at a whole range of things: the effectiveness in getting policy, the ability to work with Congress, their visionary, and I have several others. So there's 10 criteria. Carter is 26
out of 43.
Trump is based on his first time. Obviously, COVID was involved, and January the 6th was involved. He ranks near the bottom. I think he's 40 or 41. But Trump, like very few people, with the exception, I think, of Taft, will have a second opportunity to influence or impact this ranking.
Yeah, I think Grover Cleveland was the other one.
Could have been Grover Cleveland, as opposed to Taft. Okay.
Hoover.
By the way, let's go before we run out of time. Let's go to David Valente via telephone.
Yeah, I mean, you have to take a look at performance. Like with Carter, there were some good things with his administration. There was deregulation. There was the Camp David Accords. There were good things, but they were largely overshadowed by kind of administration killers. So stagflation really killed him towards the end. The Iran hostage crisis really was just an anchor that really sealed his fate. There were some foreign policy failings, especially with his handling of the Shah before the Iranian Revolution. There are, I think you have to take into account performance. I think if you're looking at it, honestly, you need to also understand that sometimes a president will benefit from some of the things that his predecessor did before he came into office, such as, I think the deregulation helped Ronald Reagan look better because the economy improved with deregulation coupled by tax cuts and some of the things that Reagan also did. But I think Biden was hurt by the fact that we did so much deficit spending going into the, coming from the Trump administration into his administration, and the market liquidity and all that stuff that really ginned up the inflation that beset Biden during the early part of his term. It really is. You have to look at it from a performance standard. Character, absolutely. We can look at character as a determining factor as well. But really, if you're grading somebody on job performance, for the most part, you're going to have to look at what the results of their administration were, and you have to look at it from a holistic standard where you're including time after their administration, what effects they had on subsequent administrations.
Mr. Haidt.
Well, I think Carter will go down in history as one of the nicest presidents we've had. He was a genuinely good guy. However, I think he'll also be known for a president that the job was just too big for him, and that is shown by what people will truly remember. Will they remember the Camp David Accords? Some, but they'll also remember a lot of the debacles that we had in foreign policy. The Iran hostages, the debacle with the rescue attempt in the Middle East, and an ill-prepared military. A lot of those things will be hung around his neck. Long gas lines, a failing economy, and maybe you can say that he put a lot of policies in place to try to curb that. If he had another 4 years, maybe it would have been, but when it comes election time and things are that bad as they were in the late 70s, early 80s, it would have been hard to give him another 4 years. So he may be ranked 26 right now. I think that's high. I think that's high because I think the job was just too big for him. But he will definitely be remembered as one of the true gentlemen to ever hold that position.
Mr. Stubblefield. Oh, sorry. This is your subject, Mr. Gilstrap.
Yeah. Yesterday was a national day of mourning for the passing of President Carter. I'm not going to speak ill of the man. I was not. I don't think history is going to judge his presidency well. I lived through his presidency. It was my first vote that I cast was for his presidency, and I don't think it was all that successful. And I'll just leave it at that. But as far as what makes a great president, which I think is actually the substance of the question here, I think what makes a great president, it's like what makes a president is a leader more than he is an administrator. And I think that any president that can come out with an inspirational message at the time that it's necessary is a great president in that slice of time. I don't know that there are many presidents who can sustain that for an entire presidency. I think that George W. Bush, in the immediate aftermath of 9/11, was a magnificent president. When he stood on the rubble and said to the firefighters, "I hear you, and soon these people are going to hear you too," and he rallied the country. It was a spectacular moment. Rudy Giuliani was a spectacular mayor at that slice of time. Ronald Reagan reset the presidency following the Carter presidency, the whole Morning in America thing. It was just, we can be better. We don't have to be this morose. We don't have to be so down on ourselves. We can do better than this. And there's this message of optimism. FDR, way before my time, but I understand that was his message as well before he became a wartime president, and then everything shifts. The problem with ranking presidencies is that history judges presidents and presidencies much more differently than the media of their time does. Lincoln was a very unpopular president while he was president. Reagan was a doofus. He was treated, he's just a movie star. He doesn't know what he's doing real time by the media. Now he's, certainly by my side of the aisle, and I think largely seen as a good president. So greatness is momentary. And I think when any leader, but presidents in particular, because there's such a focus on them, when they rise to that moment and they are there to inspire the nation to get through a thing, that locks them in as a great president.
Mr. Schultz.
Yes. What occurs to me as I listen to this and think about Bill's question is that the presidency is unique in American society and culture because you have the power, limited though it may be, you do have power to make some sweeping changes to deal with big structural injustices. One of the things that Jimmy Carter does that I happened to hear about the other day, but it hasn't been talked about a lot, he appointed more women to the federal bench in 4 years than all of his predecessors had in the history of our nation. Now, partly that was during the women's movement when the whole country was starting to recognize that there was a sort of structural injustice, and he stepped on the gas to try and address that as much as he could within his powers. That certainly was a great thing for our country. The more different kinds of people sit in judgeships and apply the same laws, the more you send the signal without saying a word to everybody who's different from the mainstream. This justice system will work for you as well. Obviously, we still have a little ways to go on some of that, but that was a big step forward that he did that doesn't necessarily get talked about a lot. He was a great person, a great example for young people in America. I feel fortunate that he was the first president that I voted for as well. It's really hard to come up with an agreeable set of metrics by which we will judge who's a great president. But I think he did as good as anyone. I mean, I think he did a fine job. Were there economic problems during his time in office? Yeah. What we find with economics is sometimes you get handed the economics of your predecessor, and you've got to confront those economics. Now, in my lifetime, nobody has achieved a soft landing like Joe Biden did, but he got voted out of office because of the economy that I don't think he caused. I don't think that was from him. So it's really hard to judge this stuff. I guess what I will say is Jimmy Carter did a lot of admirable things, had some failures too. I wouldn't call him the greatest president in American history, but he was, I think, as opposed to Mike, that he's underranked at 26.
Bill, final minute comes back to you.
Do we get David Valenti?
David, he started us off. Yeah.
Okay, fine. Yeah, I'm going to sum up, and I think your points are very good, and I am impressed with how close you are with some of these metrics by C-SPAN. I'm going to read them very, very quickly. Public persuasion, crisis leadership, economic management, moral authority, international relationship, administrative skills, relations with Congress, vision, setting an agenda, pursued equal justice for all, and coming back to John Gilstrap's point, performance within the content of their times. So these are the matrices that C-SPAN has, and I think it does a pretty good job of capturing how we view an effective president.
Yeah, and Larry's point is a very good one, that you inherit the president before you the first year of your term. Nobody passes a policy in Washington, D.C. that goes into effect the next day and makes a difference. It takes a while for those things to get into the system and make a difference or any impact whatsoever. And I kind of always look at the first year or two of any presidency as the aftermath of the person that came before you. And I think you can
So
you have to factor
I look
that
forward
in.
to hearing Larry agreeing that any problems Trump has in his first 2 years is actually belongs to Biden. That's the part of this.
Issue we're going to run out of time. Issue number 3, Mr. Michael Height.
All right, I'm going to talk a little bit about California. The California fires are in some of the richest and highest taxed areas of the country, and yet the infrastructure and the preparation has shown to be terrible. Why is that?
Can I go first on this?
Good, because I want to shoot the rocks at John.
All right, go right ahead, Mr. Gilstrap.
Firefighting was, in fact, my life for quite some time. And as early as the early 1980s. 1980 was when I rode my first fire truck. California has always been the poster child for not getting it. The fire conditions are, God has made California a tinderbox. It's just the way it works with the Santa Ana winds and just the way it works. Their regulations have never required forest control, brush control. People build, and I'm not suggesting that any of, I am not victim shaming here. Let me put that right out. This is a horrible thing that's happened out there. But in terms of regulations, they don't have water control. They don't have, it's like fire after fire, they think it's not going to happen again. And the lack of infrastructure planning is just outrageous to me. And now I guarantee that that's going to be fixed because it's in Los Angeles and because it's involving a lot of rich, influential people. You know, Chicago, after the Chicago fire, Chicago has tertiary backup systems for water. They still have cisterns. So if everything else breaks down, there are holes in the street where you can suction, you can draft water out of cisterns in Chicago because they learned that the water system breaks down over time. What's happened in California was predictable, and it's shameful, and it's a horrible tragedy.
Mr. Stubblefield.
John, I'm not sure how much anyone's to blame for this.
Oh, I'm not casting blame.
I know, but actually you are. But it's but so much of this depends upon the distribution lines. The distribution lines there are 60 to 70 years of age. It's hard to you can only draw so much out of a line that is 50 or 60 years of age. If you have 2 or 3 houses burning, fine, it's enough water. If you're having hundreds of houses burning, then there's just not enough water. There may be enough water in a reservoir, but not enough water being carried through the distribution lines. The other thing is the Santa Ana winds are it is a tinderbox, and when you have winds 60, 70, 80 miles an hour, one that will keep aircraft down that could throw water on the fire or even more spot where the embers are burning. So a lot of things came into play. It's a problem. Climate change, I think people will say it's not a climate change issue. I think it is a climate change issue, and I think we're seeing more and more of this. Going to see it on the west coast of the fires, going to see it more intense, more frequent hurricanes, and they're going to have far-ranging impact. So it's something we're going to have to live with. I think we're past the point of wringing our hands and saying we're going to do something about climate change. I think we're past that point. We're going to have to live with the consequences.
Mr. Schultz.
Yes. I find it ironic, and let me just say, here we sit in a radio station in West Virginia complaining about the infrastructure of California. But we just had a 6-inch snowstorm. And in the county where I live, except for yesterday, that was a federal holiday, maybe by now the kids are going back to school for the first time. But we missed almost a whole week of school. And in the back roads in Morgan County, after 6 inches of snow, a lot of the roads near my house were not ever plowed at all. And now they're melting a little bit during the day and freezing at night, and pretty soon it's all going to be ice. There's no chemicals on them. There's no nothing. Now, having said that, let me go on to say I drive here from Morgan County every day on a little thing that we like to call Route 9. When we're in a good mood. And there's some infrastructure issues right along that road. You'd be amazed at how many times I have had to sit at a red light in Hedgesville through 5 cycles of the light to get through a town of 450 people or whatever Hedgesville is. I don't mean to insult anybody, but
sure.
We have some infrastructure issues of our own. It happened that way because real estate developers built, all those houses that are burning out there in California are less than 40 years old. I bet you anything, right? Almost all of them. And, of course, that's all been built up over the years. Did anybody plan ahead? No. Just like they didn't plan ahead when they built subdivisions all the way around Hedgesville as far as the eye could see, and they didn't put any different red lights in or make more lanes or otherwise do it. We have a smaller version of the same problem. The problem is that theirs is a $50 billion problem. Literally, they think that the ultimate damage from this is going to be $50 billion. But the problems are the same.
Which we will all pay for, by the way.
And that's just Steven Spielberg's house.
Though California will pay more than anyone. We could, I suppose, find a way to pay for it if West Virginia would stop taking Californians' federal taxes and instead become a giver state.
My point of us paying for it is that the insurance rates for everybody will go up because of the reinsurance on a claim like this.
When they showed the video of the bulldozers pushing the brand new cars off the 4-lane highway, I thought, somewhere there's an insurance executive who's alternately weeping and clapping his hands.
That's the same. David Valente, your turn. You got 60 seconds.
Yeah, so infrastructure is an interesting thing because these fires don't start in the middle of the city. They start in the foothills. They start in remote areas where infrastructure is not going to help you a whole lot. You're not going to have fire hydrants out there in the middle of these hills. Plus the development angle where you're building houses up closer and closer to these nature areas that are tinder boxes, and they will go up. Yes, fires happen in California. Fires happen. I've been in the middle of fires out west that scorched thousands of acres, and it looks like a desert. The hellscape of burnt, just blackness wherever you look. It just happens so rapidly that all your infrastructure plans are just not going to be able to help you. Plus, once the fires start coming down, that starts cutting off power and things like that really drive things like your fire hydrants and your ability to get resources to those areas. So, we can play the blame game, but infrastructure can help mitigate some of this stuff. But when you've got high winds and fire, it is just it's a natural disaster, and you've got to take it like that, like anything, like a hurricane or an earthquake.
Okay, I jump in here. Mike, you get the final minute.
So, Larry made some good contrasts there, West Virginia to California. He sort of made my point. California is one of the highest taxed areas in our country with some of the richest people, and they still didn't have the money to do the things they needed with the infrastructure, to get it to where it needed to be. They had $50 billion to spend on the homeless, which didn't do a darn thing. There's still just as many homeless as there were. But they had that kind of money to send in this direction, but not to build for the infrastructure of natural occurrences that they know happen on a regular basis out there. So if they had directed the money where it should have been directed, maybe this wouldn't have happened. Maybe they would have had the reservoirs and full of water to eliminate a lot of this.
And on that note, we break here and remind everyone that Larry Schultz and John Gilstrap are on the clock next. And happy birthday to Donald Fagan of Steely Dan here. You born this date, 1948.
Of the other metrics, I don't think any of them will be down. If they are, it's a couple pennies here or there, but I don't think any of the prices, unless they institute price controls, which I'd like to see the Republicans justify that. I don't think that we're going to see any reductions in the price of our products.
All right, so back to the original question. What economic metrics and prices and things will improve over the next year, Mr. Gilstrap?
Well, none, because it'll be all Biden's fault in the first year, is what we've heard. So it'll take more. It'll take more than 1 year for.
You can go ahead and extend the prediction if you'd like. I'd like to have this on the record.
No,
it's recorded.
I don't know. I just don't know. I think that I will go on the record for this. I think 4 years from now, the cost of everything will not be 20% higher than it is now. I don't think we're going to see years of 8-9% inflation that has made things ridiculously expensive, more expensive for people than it was when the administration started, as it did with Biden.
Who wants to go next on this one?
I'll go next. And since Larry's willing to extend it out, I would say in the first year, he got to deal with a lot of the Biden issues, obviously. So in a year, it may not. I don't see a whole lot of change. I don't think it'll be that much farther up, that much farther down. In 2 years, I think all of these things will be down.
Price of eggs, price of milk, price
All
of
of
fuel.
them. Yep.
Inflation, unemployment.
This is recorded, right?
It is
All right,
recorded.
you heard it here first.
Yeah.
Mr. Stubblefield.
Yeah, we're going to look at this through partisan lens, regardless. The Trump supporters are going to say it's going down. The anti-Trump folks are going to say it's going up. I just hope that neither extremes. I hope it does not go up. I hope it stays the same. I think we got to give support to our president, whether we agree with him or not, whether we voted for him or not. We still have to give support to our president. So I hope he's successful, and I hope the Republicans are successful in getting laws and regulations in the books that will keep our country more or less stable and cutting down the deficit. But I'm afraid some of the extremes, I hope they don't happen.
Mr. Schultz, it comes back to you for what was a very quick go-around, I might add.
Sure. The thing that I think is that I agree with Bill that you should treat the president with respect. The difficulty that I have is I have to first judge whether I think he's lying through his teeth. And I can't respect someone who just stands there and looks me right in the face and lies to me. That's a real trust breaker. But having said that, we were told during the campaign that these prices were going to come down. Not that they were not going to continue to go up, but that they were going to come down. And then within days after the election, we were told again that, that's not so easy. I know it's not so easy. Why'd you say it? Nobody asked him that. That's the media that we live with now. I wish someone had. Well, then why'd you say we were going to do it? Anyway, I believe that all of these are going to get worse over time, and that there is going to be no great relief from the inflation. There has been a great reduction in the inflation rate over the last couple of years. No question. I mean, it's down close to historic sort of what the Fed looks for kind of numbers, 2%. It's 2.7 now. Unemployment is as low as it's been in a very long time. Both of those things are going to go up under Donald Trump.
Larry, we all anticipated the reason you asked that question. there's nothing subtle about your question.
But that's what happens when you lie to me.
You inhaled, Mr. Gilstrap.
To tout the current 2.7% inflation rate, that's lovely. But that is to ignore the last 3 years of inflation. I keep going back to the Chicago fire, one of the great incidents. The Chicago fire went out because it ran out of fuel. not because somebody managed it well. So to say that everything is cool because now we're down to a 2.7% inflation means that we have inflated everything to the point that somehow it has found stasis. But people are still hurting a lot. And that's why we had the election results that we had, I think. But it just, I think it annoys me when the fallback position is, look how great things are. We're down to 2.7% inflation.
But John, we err by trying to package everything within a 4-year block. We're saying that the Biden's accomplishments or failures was not dependent in part upon Trump. We're doing the same thing now with Trump over Biden. There is so much of a influence of the prior administration over the current administration. And so it's hard to separate, especially the first couple years. So I think you really should judge Biden's success in not what he had the first 2 or 3 years of administration, but what he has at the end. And I'll say the same thing for Trump. You should judge it more toward the end of his administration than toward the beginning of his administration.
I'm sorry. Biden pumped trillions of dollars of cash into his version of pork.
But as did
No.
Trump with COVID. Yes.
Yeah.
No,
he
COVID.
did.
Well,
Yes,
okay,
he did.
COVID. There's a special carve out for COVID.
Well, but
Well, no, you can't have a carve out. You can't.
No carve out.
That's
cannot
what
even-
causes inflation. Is carve outs.
But it didn't at that point. It wasn't until I believe the CARES Act under Biden that the Republican says, don't do this. Inflation will go skyrocketing if you do this. Please don't do this. It was completely partisan. It was on one side of the aisle that voted for this. And that is why inflation went up. It was because of that particular piece of legislation that was completely partisan.
Let me give you,
No,
hold on, Larry, hold on.
come on.
I'm going to get David Valente
No.
on for a second because he's at a disadvantage on the
it
phone. Then
wasn't-
you can go.
I mean, Donald Trump had passed $8 trillion, or at least under his administration, $8 trillion of the COVID money was spent. PPP, market liquidity early on, when the markets were going haywire when it came to COVID. The two of the three stimulus packages that were passed were under Donald Trump. That $8 trillion getting dumped into the economy is what caused your inflation, caused the value of the dollar to sink. And, we can't just say, well, Joe Biden passed the CARES Act and it caused inflation. Did it hurt inflation? Absolutely. But we can't just ignore the impact of Donald Trump's ruinous spending. Even before COVID started, he was on record pace for a 4-year term to overspend because he was just passing money out left and right. It became exacerbated over COVID, but you can't ignore the fact that Donald Trump was the president when most of the COVID money was passed out by the federal government in very badly ran programs.
The guy bankrupted a casino.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that has to do with it.
Oh, that has everything to do with it. 'Cause
It has nothing
You're
to do with it.
fooling people out of their money, and he couldn't even do that. He ran the highest deficits in 4 years of anybody. So
First of all, Congress spends the money, right? So, and everybody gets a pass on that to a certain degree. $4.2 trillion was COVID money. The rest of it was various other bits of legislation under the Trump administration, 77% of which was bipartisan legislation that was passed. Under Biden, if we're going to do this comparative thing, Biden's additional spending was $4.3 trillion, only 29% of which was bipartisan. Donald Trump's executive actions, which is the checks that he wrote, added $20 billion to the 10-year debt. Biden's executive actions, the checks he wrote, added an extra $1.2 trillion to the 10-year debt. So the numbers are the numbers. Everybody likes to hang this, take this $8 trillion thing. I will be the first one to say that COVID was a massive disaster, and it started with shutting down the world economy. That was just. And somehow you got to restart it. I don't know. I don't think anybody knew how to do it. So you throw money into it, and we are where we are. But I mean, to lay financial issues strictly at the feet of Trump's final year in office and then say that Biden didn't contribute a great deal to that during his 4 years. It's ludicrous.
Larry, comes back to you for a final thought. We're going to run out of time, Bill.
It's real simple for me. $8.2 trillion in 4 years. That's a per-year record in the presidency. For the party, that tells us every day how much they hate deficit spending.
And it's 8.4.
And Mr. Gilstrap,
Okay.
now to issue number 5. And Bill, if you'd like to work your thought in during his issue number 5, feel free to.
We've moved to the next issue.
All right. I come back to this issue a lot, that the American form of government is based on a level of trust. And we have to believe not necessarily what individuals are telling us, but certainly what agencies are telling us. And we've gone through, the last many years of being told things that are untrue. We've been told that the Hunter Biden laptop was a Russian conspiracy. We've been told that President Biden was in full control of his faculties. We've been told that the economy was fine. We've been told that inflation was transitory. We've been told all kinds of things. And we were told that Facebook was not filtering information. They're not censoring information. So now we've found out that, lo and behold, apparently Biden did have some cognitive issues that was a shock to no one, I don't believe, until it became so obvious on June 27th when during the debate performance, and nobody could ignore it anymore, and people kind of run for cover. And just last week, Mark Zuckerberg announced that they are no longer, even though they've never censored content, they're not going to censor content anymore because it has gone too far. So shameless are these people that they think that we didn't hear them say they were never censoring, so that we are now supposed to support them saying we're not going to censor anymore. The question here is, do we have, and Larry, you've talked about being lied to by Trump, and everybody's offended by who's getting lied to. Are we in trouble as a republic simply because we can't get a real answer from anybody?
Bill, just when you thought my Carl couldn't infuriate you anymore, you get Gilstrap to your right.
Yeah, it's so easy to cast these arguments using snippets of truth, and but having taken them out of context. And I think this is what you're saying, John, is right up to a certain point, but it does not give the objective picture. The action of Facebook was taken with a bipartisan encouragement by not one party, but bipartisan encouragement in 2016 to correct some of the problems they felt they saw or they did see in the election. Zuckerberg, at that time, it was to enhance responsibility. Now, over time, because the Republicans feel that the fact-checking, this is where the real issue is, the fact-checking, has become a tool against them. It's become, instead of responsible, it's become biasness. But that's migration through time with the thought process. I think the reason that Zuckerberg took the action he did was twofold. One, the fact checkers were understaffed, had been from day one, and so they were doing only a small part of what they were perceived to be doing. The second part is, because they had such a small staff, they would make some mistakes, and those mistakes have been thrown back at them as censorship, even though supposedly around only 1 or 2% mistakes that were thrown back at them, but it had huge consequence with a number of people that were put under the category that had been censored. And the third thing is, there is no question the power of the president or the power of the incoming president. Why would you want to go to battle with the president when the president has all the ammunition in front of him? So take your losses and run for shelter. And that's what Zuckerberg did.
Mr. Valente.
Yeah, I think there's some half truths here, and that what we're switching from this fact checking system to what imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, and that they're going to this community notes thing that Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it now, it really started was, with the users being able to add notes to a story that gets put out there, so that it's more of a organic fact check of what's going on with some of these articles. I hate when people complain about censorship by a private corporation. It's their right. I mean, I'm not going to tell a corporation what they can and can't do when it comes to moderating content on its own platform. Nobody has a right to post junk to Facebook. Like, if they want to take down my account now, I'm sure I've given them plenty of reasons to. No big loss. Hope just let me get my pictures off of there. But that, to me, I think we're making a big to-do about really, a private company's decision to how they moderate their content.
Mr. Height.
I think the big problem with Facebook is they're coming out and saying that they were nonpartisan, that their content selection, what they were pulling off, and saying you couldn't be on the censoring on Facebook was bipartisan. You say, well, they were short-staffed. Well, they were short-staffed on one side, because what they were pulling off and what they were censoring was all of the right and what they were saying. And then they were getting shut off of Facebook. Now, David's right. It's a private company. They can do whatever they want. But don't come and tell me how you are nonpartisan and that you are not censoring the right when it is very obvious that's what you were doing. Don't come and lie to me back then and now come before me and tell me, oh, yes, I did have conversations, or my company did have conversations with the Biden administration. They were telling us to censor certain things. So, and now we're going to fix it all. My thing is, why didn't you fix it then? It's your company. You can run it however you want, but don't come to me now and say, oh, well, we're going to fix the things that we said before weren't a problem. They were a problem. They were a problem. You were censoring the right, and you've been caught, and now somebody else is president, and you want to say, well, I need to keep Facebook going, so we're going to fix all these things. You know what? I have a hard time believing anything Zuckerberg says, and as far as I'm concerned, just ignore him. Facebook is what Facebook is. You just got to realize it's leans left and go on about your business.
And it's Zuckerberg, by the way.
Zuckerberg.
Bill called him Zuckerberg a couple of times. Mr. Schultz.
I was going to say. First of all, Mark Zuckerberg is a coward. I mean, he would have been a coward had somebody publicly challenged him from the other side. He is not concerned about politics. He's concerned about as much cash as he can put away. And so my recommendation, largely agreeing with Mr. Height, is not only that we take anything he says with a grain of salt, but maybe we need to think about just abandoning his platform altogether. I don't really have any great love for Facebook. It's the kind of thing that's a guilt producer. Every minute you spend on it, you feel a little more guilty than the minute before. And it's not giving you anything, except it can be helpful to keep up with friends, near and far, who have big events in their life. But there are other ways to do that. I don't get my news from Facebook. I try very hard not to ever think, oh, well, I saw this on Facebook, blah, blah, blah. Now, if it's the Facebook page of the New York Times or the Washington Post or some other reputable media source, then okay, I'm not believing that Facebook's going to rewrite what they said and lie to me about that. But as far as the ideas cast around the community from people, a lot of that is not very helpful anyway, because a lot of times there's not a lot of critical thinking going on as people are forming these opinions.
20 seconds.
Yeah, the idea that they're going to check facts or not check facts isn't going to change my willingness to believe about 90% of what I see on their site.
Final thoughts, John Gilstrap.
I don't have a problem that Facebook is biased. I don't have a problem that the New York Times is biased, or the Washington Post is biased, or the Washington Times is biased. I think that they just need to come out and own it and say we are a left-wing rag, we are a right-wing rag, or I'm Facebook. I'm just following the money. But to lie and say that we never did something when you've been doing it all the time is just morally bereft.
I appreciate you working in the word
Elon
bereft.
Musk going to have to come out and say my cars catch fire?
No additional debate, please. Bill owns Tesla stock. Get your final thoughts together, 8 seconds apiece, coming up after the break. Final thoughts, David Valente.
Since I disappointed you earlier, I'll just say arrivederci, my friends, and have a great weekend.
Mr. Schultz.
Adios. Have a great weekend.
Mr. Stubblefield.
Congratulations to Martinsburg with the help of Senator Capito with a $21 million grant.
Mr. Gilstrap.
It's icy out there. Gravity is not your friend. Walk like a penguin.
Mr. Height.
And it's getting ready to snow again, so get prepared.
I think 1 to 3 inches. Starting tonight, overnight, into tomorrow morning.
Go get bread and milk. I know you need it.
Eggs. Don't forget the eggs and toilet paper.
Eggs
And
toilet
scotch. Don't forget the scotch.
Dave Ramsey Show is coming up next. This is Talk Radio, WRI Martinsburg and TV 10. We'll talk again at 70. Short hours. Final thoughts, David Valente.
Since I disappointed you earlier, I'll just say arrivederci, my friends, and have a great weekend.
Mr. Schultz.
Adios. Have a great weekend.
Mr. Stubblefield.
Congratulations to Martinsburg with the help of Senator Capito with a $21 million grant.
Mr. Gilstrap.
It's icy out there. Gravity is not your friend. Walk like a penguin.
Mr. Height.
And it's getting ready to snow again, so get prepared.
I think 1 to 3 inches. Starting tonight, overnight, into tomorrow morning.
Go get bread and milk. I know you need it.
Eggs. Don't forget the eggs and toilet paper.
Eggs
And
toilet
scotch. Don't forget the scotch.
Dave Ramsey Show is coming up next. This is Talk Radio, WRI Martinsburg and TV 10. We'll talk again at 70. Short hours.
It's 5 o'clock some